annual leave, so you're having to cope with me at my administrative best. So what are we going to be doing? Well, this is the agenda. I'm delighted that our virtual hosts are going to give us a virtual tour and introduce the avatar in a short while. We've timed in a break just to give you time to stretch. It might seem over compensating in a relatively short meeting, but you can stay and network with each other in the chat if you prefer. I'm delighted that Professor Sharon Weldon, now at the University of Greenwich, is going to be guiding us through a look at transformational simulation, and I'll be giving her a hand with that. And then we have Professor Jagdanda later to talk us through virtual reality in medicine and surgery, which is great. And then we've got plenty of opportunity for you to introduce yourselves and say a little bit about what you're doing. And something that we're looking at doing for ASPE and for the meeting there is something described as ask and offer, where you might say, I really need somebody to help out on faculty, and in return I offer this, and you're asking and offering to the SimNet community. It doesn't have to be immediately reciprocated. So we might see if anybody wants to engage in some of that as we get going. So in terms of housekeeping, I'd appreciate it if you have your microphone off. I'm delighted if you want to have your cameras on, but I'll leave that as a matter of personal choice. I have to make you a presenter, so I'll try and get that done. Joy and Vimal, I think I've done that already for you, but just remind me if I don't get that right. And really, I think that's it for housekeeping. So let's just have a quick reminder about the project that this SimNet community is part of, and it's a multi-professional and service user focused network. And I'm really pleased that we have another SP training day coming up next week. So we're training some more simulated people in how to be actors, and this will be our second training day. And if you're interested in working with our simulated people, then do let me know. We might be able to help you out regarding the funding for that as a pump priming step at the start. But what I would like to point out is, as you can see, there's my name there. Sue Plummer from the wonderful University Canterbury Christchurch is also in the steering group, and Prof Ali Bakari, who's the Associate County Dean, who's been a tireless worker for all of this. Just like to say that he is actually involved with family in Pakistan at the moment, which is why he isn't here. And I'm sure you'll join me and we'll send him our best wishes, and he would be here if he could be, I'm sure. So what are we up to at the moment? Well, you're participating right now this afternoon in the ongoing work of networking and developing a network. We're still discovering people who are doing the most brilliant work, but not really shouting out about it outside of their locale and their speciality. So we're still making new links and finding people who are doing new work and building new collaborations. So do let me know if there's anything you want to shout about, and we'll put you on the agenda for the next meeting, and you'll certainly get a chance to overview it as we do our networking bits in the updates during this meeting today. So this is SimNet, and the next SimNet meeting will be, roughly speaking, February, and at the moment we don't have a virtual host for that. So if you would like to be hosts for our next SimNet meeting, we maybe have a new simulation center, not looking at Sharon particularly, but you might have a new simulation center or something that you want to show off. So let me know, and you could be the virtual host for the next SimNet in the new year. We have, as a project, bought Iris licenses, and these are fully funded, hosted until March 2023. And after that, they cost about £50 a year. So if you want to make use of the Iris authoring platform, you just need to put into your business plan that post March 23, it's about £50 a year per license. But at the moment, we are handing them out free of charge to people and institutions who want to make use of them. If you don't know about Iris, I can send you some links for it. But basically, it's a scenario authoring platform. It operates worldwide. So whilst you retain your intellectual property and your authorship is never edited out from anything that you contribute, it's a chance to share scenarios with the world. So it's a brilliant opportunity for the simulation community to stop reinventing wheels. And in my quieter moments, I do ruminate on how many times some busy person with a lot of other things to do has sat down and thought about another anaphylaxis scenario and invented another patient name. I have, to my own shock, I have worried about the fictitious address of a fictitious simulated patient, and decided it would actually be flat 12A, Lilac Avenue is probably more realistic, and this sort of thing, and inventing postcodes. So let's stop all that. Let's have the definitive perfect scenario on Iris, and you can bring it down and just use that. You can download it straight into your Mannequin operating software more and more, and so on. Simulation for Mental Health is the next project on the list there. Our Simulation for Mental Health fellows did their authoring for their scenarios on Iris and found it really helpful. So offered to you are licenses in Iris, and free of charge until March 23. Simulation for Mental Health are running 3 simulation days. First one is hosted by Robert and team. So we're very grateful and excited about that. 3rd of November is a simulation day on psychosis. Then 17th and 24th of November, there are 2 more days, depression and personality disorder, sort of the headline topics for those 2 days. We are still recruiting attendees for the 17th. The 3rd is fully booked, and it's a genuinely multi-professional group of attendees, participants for that. We have police, GP, psychiatry, community care, paramedic, the whole range of people who might be involved in caring for somebody in that situation. So that's the Simulation for Mental Health program ongoing, and we're recruiting participants for the 17th. Faculty development, we have delivered some faculty development days of our own. This is a participation day that is linked to some e-learning which is available on e-learning for health on the HEE e-learning for health facility. So you take the e-learning and then follow that up with a face-to-face training day. And these were being delivered by our Faculty Development Fellow, Phil Gurnett, who has got a new job with Sharon and is very happy there, but he's no longer doing faculty development for us. So I am recruiting a new Faculty Development Fellow, if that's something that you or a colleague might be interested in. It's a day a week secondment. And the conference, delighted to be able to confirm that the University of Surrey will be hosting our first one-day conference on 23rd of May 22. So start thinking about, put the date in your diary, but start thinking about the abstracts that you might want to submit for inclusion in the conference programme. We'll be having a couple at least of keynote speakers. So pre-pandemic, the pandemic arrived just in time to stop our first go to have this conference. But I had Bryn Baxendale, who's HEE simulation lead, and Debbie from CHFG, the human factors, clinical human factors group, giving keynotes for us there. And we will be having industry sponsorship and exhibitors. It's going to be a brilliant day. So put that one in your diary and have a think about what you might want to present in that arena on that day. I hope that makes sense to you so far. This is our meeting agenda for today. So we consider the welcome and housekeeping done. I've taken you through an overview of the project. I haven't covered everything, but I've covered everything that I'm certain about. There is a lot more going on, but we'll wait until it's closer to happening before we'll let you know about that. I'm going to hand over to Joy and Famal in a moment, and then we'll have a break after them, maybe not 15 minutes. We'll see how we're going. And then Sharon and I will give you a look at transformational simulation, and you can see the agenda there. So having given you that update, I'll just pause for a moment and just ask whether that's raised any thoughts or comments or questions at this point. And that's as close as I'm going to get to the 8 seconds recommended for that sort of pause. So I'm delighted now to stop presenting and hand over to our hosts.
Thank you very much, Andy. So some of you know me, I've met a few among you, so we'll do a quick introduction. So I'm Dr. Vimal Manali. I'm a consultant psychiatrist and simulation lead at Surrey and Borders Partnership NHS Foundation Trust.
Hi, I'm Joy Clifton, so I lead for the Surrey and Borders Partnership Trust. Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Sorry, could people hear Joy?
Could you hear me, yeah?
Could you hear Joy?
A little muffled, Joy.
Okay, fair enough. Not
okay.
a problem.
Thank you, because she's got the avatar equipment with her. So, yeah.
Switching
brilliant. Okay, this better. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity, Andy, and we are very honored to be the virtual hosts. So yeah, so we have a slide presentation and we've incorporated a few media, and we'll give a bit of a hands-on experience about what we do. And as Andy, you mentioned, it's all about sharing, and learning from each other. So, so we branded our simulation project in mental health avatar, which is the augmented virtual reality avatar in mental health training. Thank you. Sure. So we are quite proud that we've been in the business since 2015. And as Andy mentioned earlier, we hadn't publicized things much. So it all started with the vision of the then sim lead, Dr. Amanda Redworth, and our director of medical education, Dr. Martin Schmidt. And we used funds available from Health Education England, who had a technology enhanced learning strategy and plan between the years of 2013 and 2016. So the photograph on the right is where we quickly presented at the ASPE conference in that year. I think it was November 2015, and we had a great sort of traction at that conference. Thank you. So if I can tell you a bit about, what the tech is. So if you can imagine any of the news broadcasts that you see, Sky, BBC, whichever, and the background in front of the broadcaster, I mean, at the back of the broadcaster, is not usually a live background. So the feed that is taking the broadcaster is usually superimposed into a really dynamic environment. So that is essentially what the technology is. So if you can look at the photograph on the left-hand side, the gentleman in the white shirt is actually our trainee or the candidate. He is sitting in front of a gray screen. It can be a green, a blue, whatever. And there's a camera on the right-hand end of the photograph, which is a high fidelity camera, which captures the image of the trainee and then projects it to the screen. So you can see the widescreen TV where the trainee is interacting with the avatar. Now, the gentleman in the suit is our Director of Medical Education, who is sitting behind the simulation touchscreen laptop and is controlling the responses of the avatar. So, what the trainee has is an out of body experience, sort of watching themselves interact, almost live with a patient actor. And for the rest of the trainees or rest of the participants, they are just looking at the television and they see a very immersive experience.
Hi. So obviously COVID has not been kind to everybody, but in some way it was a blessing in terms of giving us actually an opportunity to grow and change our simulations into a hybrid setup. So what you see on the screen here is a couple of tweets, obviously, but where we had a couple of the junior doctors on site for their training, but it was only a limited number, and then the majority were then connecting online. So that's the start of our evolution that we had for Avatar over the last couple of years. And as you can see here, it's evolved even further. So now most of our, well, in fact, all of our training is done remotely. Vimal and I have both been in separate rooms while we've delivered it as well. And we deliver it over Teams. We have a larger audience as well. That's joining and participating and makes a wider network in a way. And it's been successful and been growing ever since.
Okay, thank you, Joy. So we had three series of digital adaptations, what we started calling an Avatar 1, 2, and possibly a 3. So this is what the facilitator's desktop now looks like. So on the left-hand side, you can see me using a touchscreen simulation laptop. There is a relay laptop, and then there is a facilitator laptop. So most sessions are done by two facilitators, but due to COVID situation, for a lot of time, I was the only facilitator. And that was before Joy joined us as the TEL lead. So I was doing the tech, I was doing the facilitating, I was controlling the responses. But that actually showed us that it could actually be run by just one person. And it was successfully run, even though I used to break a sweat. So thank you. So sorry. So again, just to again proudly showcase a timeline. So 2014, it was the launch. I mean, the project plan was there. Within a year, we could launch it, get all the scenarios done. In 2018, we had our first upgrade, and I'll show you a photograph later, where we went from a stationary simulation equipment, which had a lot of limitations because it could only be on one site. Our trust has three main hospital sites. So trainee doctors had to take time out and drive to, one particular site. So we went completely portable. So we now just need a laptop and a SIM kit. Just put into the boot of your car. You can do a SIM session anywhere you want. And last year, as Joy highlighted, we went through entire digital adaptation, creating a complete remote delivery of our SIM. So just to show you the photographs. So starting from the left-hand side, so the first photograph is of sorry, it's a bit small, but we tried to just put them all in one slide. So the first was a stationary kit. And if you can see this panoramic photograph, so that is how a sim scenario would be, where the facilitator is standing behind the simulation laptop, and then there is a wide screen at the end of that photograph, in the middle somewhere, and there's a lot of participants. So most of our sessions we have, I've even done sessions with 25, 30 participants, and it's still quite immersive. Now, as the road moves forward, we then have the simulation laptop. We are able to take it. So we are even doing one-to-one simulation sessions. So if I decide on one day that I want to do a simulation session with my trainee, I just get out the laptop and say, okay, let's see, you found it difficult to speak with a patient with, I don't know, psychosis. Let's give you a scenario. And so, yeah, so just those photographs there. So what we are now going to do is we are going to show you a couple of scenarios. Now, definitely we don't have the time to show you some start to end of scenarios, but just to give you a flavor how this is done on Teams at the moment. So in a pre-COVID situation, this will all be quite live, but we'll give you an idea how we are doing things now. So I've got three scenarios. So the first scenario, shall we move to that? Yeah. So the first scenario is a very common, situation encountered by multi-professional streams, especially associated with a mental health unit, where the police picks up somebody who is suspected of, behaving in a strange way, suspected of, having some psychosis, and they put them on what is called the 136 of the Mental Health Act. So it is the job of the nursing staff or the healthcare assistant or the junior doctor on site to do a quick initial assessment. Why has the patient been brought to the site, brought to the place of safety? So I'm going to do two things simultaneously. So you can now see, so Joy's screen is now the avatar. Can I request everybody else to switch off their webcam? So just me and the avatar on the screen, please. So you're probably seeing me half and half. Occasionally, there's a bit of a misalignment where I'm looking away from the avatar, but, I hope, you can all see it. So I'm just going to ask you questions and you can see how the avatar responds. So I'm just going to do a prompt just to make sure that everything is okay. I couldn't hear that. Could people hear that?
No, we're not hearing the avatar at the moment.
No problem, thanks.
Now,
I was
yes.
on mute.
No, that again went off.
Intelligence.
Okay, are you able to hear that now?
I heard intelligence.
Okay, so now I'm just going to ask this gentleman. So, John, can you tell me a bit about why the police brought you to hospital?
I know it's in my record that I exposed myself, but it isn't true. My brothers, when you meet the trials of various kinds, the testing of your faith produces steadfastness.
Okay, John, I was told by the police that you were probably talking to yourself on the street. Do you hear voices?
Did you know that hearing voices is a normal part of human experience?
Okay, and have you been hearing them lately?
Before I was taking this medication a couple of years ago, I would walk down the street and think that there was someone behind me talking about me. But when I turned around, I couldn't work out who it was.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there with that scenario. So that is an entirely clinical scenario. So I'm going to show you something else, and then we'll take some questions if that's okay. So just give me a second while I switch to. So the next scenario is about a 72-year-old lady
What did you want to see me about? Have we met before?
who has come for a follow-up appointment, and she has been diagnosed with moderate dementia, and she's been prescribed some medication, and the clinician is trying to understand whether she's taking the medication, has her memory improved a bit. So I'll just ask a couple of questions. Let me know if you can hear her.
I'd rather not discuss that now, if that's okay with you.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. So, Irene, I understand that you were prescribed some medication recently. Can I ask you, do you understand what medication have you been prescribed?
I'm on some tablets for my memory. I'm not too sure exactly when the doctor prescribed them. I've got an alarm so that I know when to take them. The funny thing is that sometimes I hear it go off and I think it's the oven.
Okay, so does that mean that you've been taking them more often than not?
I get a bit muddled sometimes, but don't we all? The doctor has given me a pill box and I try and keep track, but it's quite hard to remember. I'm not sure I really need them anyway. Sometimes there are still pills left in there at the end of the week. I don't know why, because I'm very careful with things like that.
Hmm. Thank you, Irene, for telling me that. Can I just ask, how are you managing by yourself in terms of, having diet, fluids, etc.?
My children worry about me getting frail. I can't stand that word. The thing is, I just don't always remember to eat. Sometimes I think I've already eaten and only realize later when things spoil in the fridge.
Okay. So that was the second scenario. Just because we may run short of time, I'm going to show you a non-clinical sort of a management-linked scenario. 1 second. So this is a
Have you got a moment? I need to ask your advice.
so this is a situation where it's a mental health unit, inpatient unit, where the night nurse has asked the morning shift nurse that I want to discuss something confidential with you. There is not much in the prompt we give to candidate in this. It is about how confidentiality can be maintained. How do you rise up to an uncertain situation, stuff like that. So please let me know if you can hear the avatar.
Is that important?
Okay.
Have you got a moment? I need to ask your advice.
Sure, Karen, tell me what's been happening.
When I was doing the night meds yesterday, I didn't realize at first, but I think I made a mistake. I don't think it's a serious one, but I wanted to tell someone.
Okay, do you want to tell me a bit more details? What happened?
It was Bill. He's on amlodipine and on Epizel. I gave him 2 10-milligram tablets instead of 5s. Of the amlodipine, I mean. I think the donepezil was okay.
Okay, thank you. So those were the three demonstration scenarios that we wanted to show you. So if we can get people back on the webcam and the slides, then thank you, Joy. Any quick comments, or we can go our questions? And oh, Craig is joining us. That's okay. So Craig used to be our former tel lead. Any quick questions, or we can, show you a couple more stuff, and then we can take questions. I can't see the chat box if there's anything there. So just going back to the slide which we were on.
Go for it. So what you're seeing now is bear with me a moment. So what you're not seeing rather is what Livermore's facilitator was doing. So what happens is there's a laptop basically with a touch screen. Are you able to hear me? Okay. So there's a touch screen there that will be in effect a matrix of different types of responses that then will also interact based on not just what the facilitator is doing, but normally what the trainee is also what the trainee's responses are. So it can either be very difficult or very hard or very easy, depending on the day or the topic that somebody is running along with, and that's how it interacts along with the team's experience. So it's a very good interactive experience there.
So if we can, so there's been few publication of our results, but the most recent was at the Royal College of Psychiatry International Conference in the past June 2021, where, as Joy highlighted earlier, COVID, as much devastating it was to the majority of us, for us in mental health sim, it was an opportunity. We could quickly upscale. We were at the right place at the right time. And if you look at the word cloud in the middle, so trainees have said it's quite observational, valuable, fantastic technology, quiet online interaction. People have been sitting in their pajamas at home and doing their sort of sims, so they never could envisage something like that before COVID. And on the towards the right hand side of the post, that is the most of the feedback that we have received in terms of how relevant do you think this is to the clinical scenarios that you encounter daily in your clinical practice. Do you want more of simulation in your weekly academic training that trainee doctors get? And in terms of the content that they are saying, how good it is. So it's been quite sort of enthusiastic feedback.
Whilst I'm looking to see, there is some chat in coming from Frimley, who have your
Yes.
avatar.
Hi, Paul.
We will be hearing from Paul and everybody when
Yes.
we go round. Could I ask?
Yes.
I think the first thing that occurs to me is that this actually has a wide range of applications, doesn't it?
Yes.
Basically, it's an opportunity to look at a consultation in a very precise way. And so I can imagine a range of opportunities that might want you to employ this. How long does it take? Say I came to you and said, I'd like to set up a pharmacy. I see Shane's picture here. So let's take, for example, I wanted to set up a set of pharmacy consultations. How long would it take from coming to you with the initial idea to taking away a product that we could actually use in the field, so to speak?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll try my best to answer that. So, so I think it's a good place to just say that we already have 31 scenarios. So when people like pharmacy, what you're saying, Andy, if you're interested in the product, then what we encourage and support you in is developing your own scenarios. So the contractual agreement with any provider, any university, NHS organization that have bought our product is that whoever develops new scenarios, others get it free of cost. So we are now in the process of developing, sort of 9 more scenarios. Everybody in the network are going to get that free of cost. So in terms of getting the equipment, so if you already have sort of a Wirecast subscription or a 17-inch touchscreen laptop and stuff, then all that it needs is scripting and shooting and post-production of the avatar. So, so the company that we have the partnership with is called Xanadu Virtual Learning Environments. So the director of Xanadu says that he can shoot 2 video avatars in a half a day. So that is like 4 scenarios in one day. and the post-production takes about a week or two just for those 4 scenarios. And then it is sort of the facilitators familiarizing themselves. But if we take a step back, the scripting is the key to the whole. So when you're talking about a pharmacy sort of an interaction, either with a customer or whatever the pharmacist is doing in terms of medication discussion. So if the scripting, it can, I mean, if you have people dedicated to doing sim and they're not sort of bogged down by clinical activity, it may be a matter of a week or two where, so essentially if you have a line of questioning, you just need 3 responses: an engaged, a neutral, and indifferent or hostile. And then we ensure that there is no repetition and that you can build a matrix. So very possibly from the time that you purchase the product, you could develop a scenario within a 6-week period. So that is, yeah.
I'll add the caveat that it's obviously depending on the person who's asking for the information. It depends on the availability if they're able to help you with the scripting, right? So that's obviously a big caveat there. It takes as long as the resources that are involved, as long as they've got the resource to help build it, because obviously the line of questioning is depending on the topic, then we can run with it, if that makes sense. I saw that there's also a couple of hands up.
I don't know who went first. Yeah.
So the hand I see is Jane Room.
Yes, that's the one I see.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. So I'm a GP, so I'm coming at it from a primary care perspective. So there's 2 things actually. I'm looking at your list of scenarios and thinking those are all completely what we would love to see and use in primary care. So that was sort of fantastic. The downside of being a GP and in primary care simulation is we currently do not have any budget at all. So I suppose I was sort of wondering, is there sort of possibility? I've got a new role as a KSS GP fellow for Kent, Surrey and Sussex, so we're looking at developing simulation across the region, and I just wondered whether there's potential to link in or anything along those sort of lines.
No, very much so, and you'd be sort of surprised to hear that the GP trainees who come to us in psychiatry, so we do these sessions with them, and the feedback we get is excellent. And Paul and his team at Frimley Health, so they're not a mental health trust, so they're an acute trust. So they are using this as a difficult conversation simulator, but Avatar is still the brand. So we were not charging for our intellectual property till mid this year. So it's still not set in stone, So the cost of the product, I mean, we can probably say at the end of the slide, people will be surprised. There's not, so if you already have your own sort of, very high-end laptop with a good graphics card and stuff, isn't that right, Joy? So it'll be, you can, get started as quickly as possible. And just like, when you're doing some, your tutorials at GP surgery or something, I mean, that is one of my sort of development visions for psychiatry. I want each consultant, so like that, each GP tutor to have their own sim available, so that if you see a trainee struggling with, I don't know, assessing self-harm in primary care, so then they say, okay, that didn't really go well. Let's do that scenario. You have this to hand. Tell me how you would do this again. So yeah. And if I can just link in with what Andy said initially, now this is what we are doing, and because we hold the IP, then we want people to develop so we wouldn't know what your dreams and ambitions are. And we would learn from you as well. And I'm sure that people will have a use of Avatar that we are not thinking today.
Yeah, everybody's got a different sort of mission and different angle. We've obviously developed it with a mental health trust in mind, right? But obviously, equally, as you're just saying, Jane, there's relevance for other things. And when, for example, earlier in the year with our spa services, they found themselves with a new team. It actually came it was an opportunity for them to do some training for a new team as well, based on all of the information, based on the triage or the SPA sort of simulations that we had, and actually there were some very interesting conversations that came out of it, and some very thoughts from a very new team. So there's different ways to use it.
Can I just say one more thing with GP training, Jane? So if you look at the middle column, the triage service. So this is our single point access, meaning that anybody who wants to refer a patient or a crisis line. Now, I do know that a lot of GPs and GP trainees, you're doing telephone consultations or video consultations. And a lot of you, I mean, for almost everybody, there's no rule book. You're all learning, as time is progressing. Now, we have 6 scenarios, which is only audio. There's no video avatar. But, there's a lot of lifelike background. So I think there's a dog barking, there are, so it's like real life scenario where you can't really hear somebody, or, you really don't know what to do. Somebody's, there's a silence at the end of the phone, but they made the appointment. Now you're fishing for, so yeah, so please, come back to us and we'll show you how we do things. Robert, is that?
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to ask probably a very stupid question, really, but I wondered how much have you used this with peer assessment as well as with just on the single assessment that you're talking about at the moment?
Yeah. So we haven't till now used this for any formative assessments because we are entirely focusing on soft skills, communication skills, difficult conversations. But people who have bought the product from us, they are thinking of medical student evaluation, OSCEs, and even nursing teams are looking at, creating this into competency attainment, sort of whatever they're doing. So yes, so it depends on what you want to do with it. So we got 36 scenarios, and even to use those 36, I've been doing this for 3.5 years. I have barely done 1/4 of scenarios. So yeah, so yes, you could do whatever you want.
I guess my question was also, do you do this? Do other people watch how this scenario is developing so that they can comment on how the actual scenario went, as opposed to just a single person or the educator?
No, so exactly. So we use a peer debrief. So we don't do a start to finish. We don't run the scenario. So for this patient with psychosis, so one trainee might start off the questioning, and after about 3 or 4 minutes, we'll take a break. So then we do a debrief within, okay, how do you think that was being played out? And we would ask, okay, has anybody had a similar experience? Then we will bring that shared experience. Then we will get somebody else, okay, now imagine you got that information that the first trainee has already got. What more would you want to ask? Or if somebody says that I might try something different, then we would say, oh, okay, let's hear how you would try that. So that's why it's quite an immersive and yeah. Thank you. If I can just show the other. So again, so in terms of what we are doing, and some of you are already part of like Frimley Health and people, we already collaborating. So we've been in the business since 2015. We are trying to showcase. So we are doing the ASPE. We are running a workshop in 2 weeks' time at the ASPE National Conference. We have a 90-minute workshop. So if any of you are, and I don't need to say Andy, most of you are attending that. So if, please do spend some time with us. So yes, thank you. We have gone a bit international in terms of doing demos. So there are people from Australia who are now interested. We currently have, so we have 31 scenarios, and we've had the fund now for 9 scenarios. Now, so that is a new scenario development. So 8 are funded by our own trust who have seen the value. 1 we are getting from Health Education England, what is called a support, like supporting return to training. So that is people who've been on mat leave, or who are coming back into training, or who've been working but they feel quite out of depth because they've not been working for a few years or something. So we are doing that. Now we are going to use the COVID recovery fund as well, because a lot of trainees have said that the more they do sim scenarios, they feel more confident, so their well-being sort of improves. So Andy has been kindly supporting us with the debrief training, and we will continue to utilize Andy's expertise, and we want to develop that into the package we offer. Our final aim is that we want a UK-wide repository of scenarios. So any of you who would buy things from us, you would develop yours. We keep on developing every couple of years. if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
and just to add, like people like Paul, I know you recently bought it. Things like it, there needs to be a QA also involved, and there's a collaborative development as well. That's why collaboration roadmap. I can't say the word properly. Sorry. So that's why the collaboration roadmap is quite key, because it builds a database and a repository for everybody that's using it as well, and keeping it at a good quality assurance. And you can see we've got quite a lot of traction at the moment. Vimal and I have been doing a few demos recently. And then just moving on to the next slide, obviously, we thank you very much for your time here.
thank you very much. Back to you, Andy. Thank you.
Don't go yet,
Okay.
because I held this back because it's a bit more of a general question, but I think it's something that is worth raising, and that is that what you're describing is this sort of nodal approach to writing a scenario. So especially if you run it as a stop-start, what you're doing is you engage with the service user, and then there's a range of responses, and then you engage again, and there's a range of responses. And one of the things that I'm always curious about, I'm a sad man with no other life, which is probably why, is if you start to go off on the one trend. So if your questioning is meandering from best practice sufficiently that you're getting a more and more aggressive response, how do you build that into a pre-scripted set of nodes? Because your nodes will actually always deviate back to the norm, in effect.
Exactly. I'm really thank you, Andy. You asked that. If we can just quickly show the slide where my
Which slide you want?
Of our sorry. Yeah, thank you. So if you look on the screen, as Joy was explaining, it looks like there are only 3 narratives. No, there are multiple narratives you can do, and it is up to the facilitator. But in my 3 years, I can never predict how a sim session will go. It is trainee dependent. So as you said, Andy, if a trainee goes off track, the facilitator has a lot of stock responses prompting questions. So if in that psychosis station, if the trainee is not asking questions about have you taken medication, there is a prompt, something like, I don't know why they keep prescribing me this medication. So that suddenly reminds the trainee, oh, okay, so I should have asked. So it's not a punitive, it's more encouraging and facilitating. So in terms of, but sometimes we like to see how tangential somebody can go, because they may be learning in that. So, but again, the facilitator has to think on their toes, you know. And there's only finite responses to the avatar. So there may be something that we hadn't thought of and the trainee asks, and if it is relevant, the facilitator just speaks into the mic, you know.
And also there's an opportunity also with there's also not just the defined matrix, but there's also prompts, which allows the facilitator almost to rein it back in as well. So if you want to make it a closed comment that somebody's uncooperative, then you might say no. You know.
Yeah, exactly. So that old lady that you saw, I can actually make her stand up and leave. So that is and that is a bit. I mean, every time we do that, it's a bit. It's spooky, right? So when she does that, but then it is interesting that there's a lot of silence in the room, and then the trainees, some of them have no idea what to do, and then we bring back the avatar. Oh, sorry, I was feeling a bit stressed. What were you asking me? And then there is a sigh of relief, and then okay. So yeah, I don't know whether I answer you.
That's a lovely answer, actually, and I like the approach you're describing, because I think you've indicated a couple of windows there. So you can actually use a microphone to speak for the avatar if necessary.
Yeah.
So that I would regard as a safety net to be used if needed, if you like. And I'm guessing that what you could do is you could have psychosis consultation 1 with a I don't want to use the wrong words, but you could have a relatively stable interaction, if you like, and then you could have consultation 2, in which the interaction has a wider range of variety that may be a more senior training. Falling back on an aviation parallel, it would be like the pilot going into the simulation cockpit and saying, give me the one where both engines burst into flames and then, you know, the wheels fall off. And you wouldn't give that to a trainee on their first day, but you know. So as your library of scenarios builds up, you'll be able, you might find that there's a wider range of reusable learning objects that you're developing.
Yeah, no, exactly, Andy. And we do that because at the moment, we have 3 different training levels of junior doctors who come to us. So as I mentioned, GP trainees, foundation doctors who just graduated, and then psychiatry trainees. So their training needs are very different. So that's why the facilitators, so whenever it's a psychiatric trainee coming, I definitely make it a bit more complex and difficult for them. So if it's a foundation trainee, I'm happy with basic competencies, you know, but they're all part of the 20 or 30 trainee group, and it blends very well. You know, they learn from each other. And now, as Joy mentioned a bit earlier, the audio only scenarios, it's not for medics. It's mostly run by senior nurses, occupational therapists, and psychologists, so who man the crisis line. And their debrief technique, I quite love when they use Avatar. So especially an example, I mean, I can't show that now, but it's like a gentleman who is worried about his wife because she's left a suicide note and he has no clue where she has gone. Now, police are not taking him seriously. He's calling the crisis line. It's a 40-minute scenario. How do you contain? So, yeah. So please do check us out if you want to. If any more questions now, I'm happy to answer, but I think we are going about, you know, time, isn't it? So thank you, everybody. I'm just looking at the.
I'll post my email address on here.
Yep. Sure. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
I'm amazed. I think a 40-minute scenario like that, it would wipe me out. There you go.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Joy and Vimal, for a very engaging presentation on this, and the growing range of scenarios that you have written for it. I was quite impressed to see that list. I think it's a while since I've seen the list, and it's definitely impressive, and we'll have to see what you do next. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at ASPE.
Thank you.
And you've reminded me to say to everybody here, 8th, 9th and 10th of November, ASPE virtual conference is going to be really good this year. The 9th and 10th of the conference proper. The 8th is a masterclass day, and it has some really good content. So do check us out. It's well worth the look. And that takes us pretty well up to where we've offered you the chance of a break to just stand up for a moment and stretch your legs and take a breath. What I'm going to do is we will take this break now, but we'll leave everything running as it was. So you can chat in the chat line, and you can contact people individually. If you bring up the participant list and click on their circle with their initials or their photo in, you can send an individual message to somebody if you wish. So let's see you back here at 3:15, please, and we will give you a look at transformational simulation. So something simulation really needs is some new ways of using it, doesn't it? Nothing new ever happens in simulation. So Sharon and I have a new look for you. So we'll see you at 15:15.
I think Joy and I will be here if at all anybody has anything to ask. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Robert, completely agree. No.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Joy, can I ask you to stop sharing your screen, and we will proceed. So can somebody give me a wave if you see my slide with the agenda? Is that, yeah, thank you, Rosie, Jane, brilliant, okay. So we are now at transformational simulation, a new look, and Sharon is really leading this presentation and I'm helping. So I've got control of the slides really, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to introduce the topic, and then Sharon will take you through some videos, and then we'll have a look at some of the academic structure behind all this idea. I know I'm involved in it, but this is long overdue. So transformative simulation.
Is that for me to come?
I'm just going to say this is a definition of it as a tool to transform health and care through collective learning. And at the moment, I'm grappling with the idea of it being easier to describe what it isn't. So what it isn't is the use of simulation as traditionally accepted as a pedagogic tool to deliver skills and behaviors learning. And simulation is much more versatile than that. So what is it called? How does it work? And how do we establish a body of knowledge for it? I think that's really it. So over to Sharon.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so this has been something we've been working on for a while, and I think really to set the scene, we're just going to play a video to kind of open your mind to the possibilities of simulation. And you know, simulation has grown rapidly in healthcare over the last decade or two. But we've kind of created, as Roger Kneebone would say, a clinical insider frame around it. So we've kind of decided what it is already and what it isn't. But then if we think about Eduardo Salas, and he says the only limitation to simulation is going to be our imaginations. So we need to think a bit differently about how we can use it, and people are using it differently. So we need to understand what this different uses, purpose is, and have a bit more clarity on it, because simulation is complex. There's so many different ways we can use it, so many different tools. So hopefully by us taking you on this journey that we've been going on, you'll have an understanding of what we mean and we can discuss it. But we'll play this video first, just to kind of give you a sense of some different uses of simulation. Andy, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm using all my pressing button skills at the moment to make sure that it plays with sound. So let's hope, Sharon, that it plays with sound.
Fingers crossed.
You will find that the Fernando Imran.
Just check your details, so your date of birth.
I thought the simulation was incredibly true to life. I mean, I work in an environment like that. Surgery.
I think we need to remove this clip.
The young lady did express her desire for it to stay in, sir, because she is a dread.
It needs to come out. Clip.
She did really express her that...
Clip, nurse. Tell me what you'd like to do next. We're going to do the technical Fine. Okay, well, I'll make sure the pre-med's given.
Can you make sure that the staff know that the next patient will be in?
I'll make sure they do.
South Africa on the weekend.
Don't remind me.
Amazing. I was in Cardiff. I went over to Cardiff to watch the rugby, the Welsh play, and it was heaving with Irish.
Right, it's dramatic.
Fine, doctor. It's my chest. I'm really worried about it. It comes back and coughing and waking her up in the middle of the night. But Mama, वो ठीक है.
मैंने समोसे बनाए.
समोसे बनाए.
You mustn't eat samosas. Have you cut down on the smoking, Mr. Arch? Yeah. Answer that.
It's taking real life case studies and it's about applying solutions to those and seeing how it might have changed it. And it didn't, you know, the changes didn't make it a perfect scenario. There were still issues that needed tweaking, but it's a way of simulating. It's a way of testing out how things might.
Why are you sending in non-doctor person? I want to be seen by doctor.
They are diabetes mentors. Mentors, yeah.
You know, he was actually referred to hospital to the diabetic services, but for some reason it sort of got lost in the system, so he never actually
referred him again when I saw him previously.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a little bit of time, maybe a couple of weeks.
Well, I think initially it just got lost in the system, and he never actually got an appointment. So
a lot of people knew a Raj, you know, Tony, our clinical lead for diabetes. It's interesting. First thing he said when he stood up was, actually, I met a Raj, you know, yesterday, and he knew exactly the person.
I just think it's been a marvellous 2 days. I think it was very informative in every way, and it just, we hope this is the future. It's just care that is continual care, and this is the most important thing.
You can really feel that this is a real situation, and you know, people are talking over each other, and you can't necessarily get your point across, or the point is missed. It's that is very real, and actually that enables you just to keep it in the here and now, as opposed to thinking very theoretically about things. I think it brings you back to a very practical point.
A very typical interaction between a patient and a GP.
From what you're describing, I do have some concerns, because you've been losing weight and you're actually bringing up the food now.
The simulation was useful. The first of them, when without the breath test, as it were, almost replicated word for word my own sort of experience. In that sense, it brought it quite alive to me. It did show the difference quite well, and how, you know, some patients perhaps would be more put at ease with that facility being immediately available.
Brilliant, thanks, Andy. I don't know if that was a bit jumpy for you all, but it was a bit for me. It might just be my computer though, and I'm not sure what that's made you think either. That's just some examples of some transformative simulations in action, and it's to really show you the different ways that it can be done. It's based on some very specific projects that myself and Roger Kneebone did a few years back. So it's a certain type. But when we think about transformative simulation, we're thinking really about anything that it's not the traditional way we're used to doing simulation in terms of simulation-based education. It's more about thinking, how can we use simulation creatively to solve problems, to look at things differently, to involve people, and it's happening everywhere, but there's problems around it because people are confused about it sometimes, how you do it, because there isn't guidance out there. People don't know if what they're doing is right, or sometimes they're trying to transfer across some of the concepts from simulation-based education into this transformative simulation types that don't quite work. And this is the work that we've been doing, is we're trying to understand it better through the literature that's available. And there's been a real explosion because it's been happening for the last decade or so. But because of COVID, all of a sudden everyone's using simulation for purposes like this, because it's a way of bringing people together to solve problems and work collectively. And so, Andy, I don't know if you want to go on to the next slide. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions about this, so I don't know whether I should stop now or continue. I'll continue on, and then please we can talk about the videos after. But basically, what the ideas we're forming based on our knowledge of it and the literature is that the difference of transformative simulation, that it's using simulation as a tool rather than a pedagogy. So it's not having specific learning objectives. It's not trying to show someone what to do or how to do it, but it's more bringing people together to understand things and learn things collectively. And so therefore the main objectives are not necessary to educate, maybe to learn together, but not to specifically educate, but to introduce, improve, intervene, involve, identify problems, include people, and influence what's already happening in healthcare. And then that really means that there's a lot more opportunity to translate those findings, because then whatever you discover during those simulations, you can translate into practice. So it's a really different way of thinking about how we're using simulation. I'd love to hear if any of you have been using simulation in this way yourselves, but we'll move on to the next slide. There we go. So what we've been doing is essentially, it's been quite a difficult process because it's not defined yet. It's very difficult to identify transformative simulation applications in the literature because different terminology is being used. We found hundreds of types of terminology. People, as I said, are quite confused as to where it sits, and it's being published in different types of journals. So not just the traditional simulation-based or education journals, but things like organizational journals or policy journals, journals you wouldn't expect to go hunting for this kind of information. And what we've done based on the literature is try to categorize the different approaches, the different types of transformative simulation, because we want to be able to start digging down into the detail of what it can do, so that then we can move on to, well, what are its affordances? How can you design it? And some of those more important questions. And these are what we've come up with so far. So the 7 SBIs, and they're a lovely rainbow colour, which we kind of like, this, especially during the COVID times and how this work has been progressing quite quickly during that time. So we have, as you can see here, innovation, improvement, intervention, involvement, identification, inclusion, and influence. Now, the innovation is the introduction of something new. So it's introduction of novelties, or the alteration of what is established. And we can give some examples of this with the papers when we move forward. But it's using simulation to say, here's something new, how would it fit within the system, for example? And I can give an example off the top of my head, actually. So, well, this is an example, it's a twofold. So what we found as well is a lot of the literature, sometimes they will do just one of these, but often they'll do 2 or 3. So it might be that a primary objective is to introduce an innovation, but the secondary objective is to include people, you know, patients, etc. in that. So an example I'm about to give is a diagnostic. It was in the videos. You saw it at the end. The diagnostic breath test for esophageal cancer. Now that test was right at the beginning of it. It was in its infancy. So they'd done the research. They found that they could identify, or potentially identify, if someone was at high, you know, potentially had esophageal cancer, so that they could go for a biopsy. But it was about 10 years off of being implemented, but what they were trying to figure out is where would this sit best in the system? And they wanted to involve patients and members of the public to get their input on this. And to be honest, they did this because the funders said, you need to do that to get this funding. So it was a tick box exercise. But they engaged with myself and my team at the time, and we said, well, we can use simulation to do this, because you're talking about a complex care pathway and you want to make sure the patients and publics feel informed enough to be able to give you the information you need. So what we did is we simulated the current care pathway using real healthcare professionals, and we had a simulated patient, and then we simulated how it could look with the breath test and how the healthcare professionals saw the breath test being placed. Now, interestingly, it was put in the GP, in the GP centre, and what came about was the esophageal cancer patient survivor said, you know, this is all very well and we like the idea of it, but why put it with the GP? The reality is most of us getting this are men, and the reason we present late is because we don't like going to our GP. What you want to do is put it in a pharmacy, because that's where we're going to get our Gaviscon for our symptoms. Now, it seems so obvious, but at the time it hadn't been considered by all those people involved with developing it and thinking about how it's implemented. And there was loads of other outputs, but it was those discussions, and it was using simulation to have a level playing field where the medical jargon didn't matter, the complexities of the system didn't matter so much, because people could point to elements of the simulation, or they could understand what the purpose was and what people were getting at. So that's one example where the primary objective was a simulation-based innovation, but with also a simulation-based inclusion element. We then got improvement, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard or seen or even done yourself, but that's more like the quality improvement projects. And a lot of simulations being used more and more to look at how we can make things better, improve the systems that are already there. So working with people to say, this is how we do it, how can we do it differently? Then there's the interventions, when you're going to actually have a new intervention put in place. I mean, if you're going to have, for example, a new job role, a new, say, nursing associates is a new role now come along, how do you put them into the system and make everyone aware of how that happens and how that's going to affect and change everything? And simulation is a good way to do that, to have not necessarily tell everyone how this is going to be, there's an element of that, but also to have everyone involved to point out any problems or to be part of that new development, part of that new intervention, so that you've already got buy-in and support, as well as everyone being aware of the changes that are about to take place. And then we've got the simulation involvement, so the process of involving people. Hang on, just bear with me. I've got something that I was going to bring up, but I don't know if it will come up. So it's a way of trying to bring in people's new experiences and perspectives and bridging that understanding. So involving different people. So you saw in one of those video clips that we showed, which was essentially about bringing, it was a local clinical commissioning group, and what they wanted to do was it was quite some years ago now, but it was when the Department of Health was giving money to try and get integrated care implemented. And they were saying to CCGs at the time, we're going to pilot some study, some work, but we want you to, you know, really engage frontline staff and patients and members of the public in how you get this going. And we use simulation then to kind of problem solve. So to look at certain complex patients with complex conditions, sorry, not complex patients themselves, but the conditions, and think about all the different services involved and how they could be streamlined and work together better. And simulation, again, was another fantastic way of involving all those different people and, again, level the playing field. And we had all sorts of people. We had the CCG members, we had managers, we had all types of frontline staff, patients, lay members. We also had someone from IT come in, which was very interesting because they said, I wasn't really going to come along, but I popped my head in to have a look, and all of a sudden realised everything that I was trying to do wasn't going to work. And the simulation had helped them to realise that and change their whole strategy and how they were going to implement the IT systems for integrated care. So that was really interesting. There's then the simulation-based identification. So this is when we're really thinking about trying to identify certain things in practice, because sometimes we don't know what's wrong, so we need to understand it, and simulation's a way to do that. And a great example is latent safety threats, where simulation's being used a lot. So it's a way of, you know, in situ simulation, having everyone together and undertaking a typical day wherever you work, and understanding through the scenario what problems might cause latent safety threats. And you know, the literature is absolutely popping up with that all over the place, and how useful and beneficial that is. Another one is in terms of inclusion. So inclusion is more about involving everyone for the idea, to generate ideas that's for collective benefit. So how you collectively work together to and making sure everyone's included, so you're collectively changing something. So it's kind of empowering, it's sharing, it's enabling. And then the final one is influence. So how are you using simulation to influence policy or practice or change culture? There's a lot of simulation popping up that's about culture change at the moment. And so I'm probably not doing a great job of describing all these. They're still quite, and what we're doing with the literature is trying to show how the categories are there in the literature, so that you can get an idea of all the different studies that we have aligned to these different categories. The problem with the literature is that although the studies are there, because they're confused themselves, it's like untangling a spider web at the moment. But what we're hoping is, and if we move to the next slide, Andy, which is essentially why the need for the categorization, is that it's already happening. And what we're hoping for is that we can stop this confusion in terms of how you design it, how you conduct it, what it is. We can make it more easily accessible in terms of identifying it in the literature. If it has a term and you know what that term is, you can find it. And then we can advance it. We can't advance it at the moment because everyone's doing fab stuff, but they're all doing it off in their silos, and they're all doing it according to their own terms, and maybe not necessarily getting the best from it because it's not being given the time to, you know, develop. So that's what we want to do. There's a lot of terms in the literature, and more generally, as you're all aware, related to simulation, and we don't want to create a whole new set of terms. And this is why we're basing this on the already existing literature. So we're allowing the terms to emerge based on what's already out there. And the hope is that by doing that, we're kind of already building on the great work that's happening, but we're just defining it for everyone so people can move it forward and make something more of it. And it will grow a life of its own, really, hopefully. This is the intention. And then I guess really it's for you to all tell us what you think and whether or not it makes sense, whether or not it's needed, whether or not you can see this kind of simulation being useful to your practice or not, or is it something that you don't think it's an appropriate use of simulation? I mean, I don't know. It's interesting for us to know. So we're kind of leaving that wide open for you all. And I think that's it, Andy, is it? Have we got anything? Got another slide?
There is a couple more slides. There's the slide with the example publications, Sharon, but I think I can't resist adding a few words, if I may. I think that when I wrote the mission statement for this project and this SimNet, I described it first of all as being service user focused, and we talk about learner centered and service user focused, and several of these categories really drop into the full range of human factors work. And I don't here mean human factors specifically about safety, but the full range of human factors about user experience and everything. So this is about end user experience partly, and it drops into different categories here and there. Simulation is an endless opportunity to give service users a voice, and so it demonstrates that in some of this work. So that was one thing I want to say. This latent safety threats is a really nice example of why this work is so difficult to publish, if you like, because no self-respecting journal today would publish a paper that was called something like, "I was curious as to whether there were any latent safety threats, and I found 4." Yeah, that's not a paper. Those 4 latent safety threats might be massive and so on and so forth. That's not a paper. You would have to hammer it somehow into a shape that fitted the criteria for simulation-based education, one way or another. And you'll find this at conferences. And it's funny, really. It's sad because the great educators value curiosity and discovery almost above everything else, and Roger Kneebone, is endlessly curious, endlessly fascinated, endlessly looking at what you can do, and will pop up an operating theatre in the shopping centre to try and find out. And of course, if your name's Kneebone, maybe it's easier to get published, but that's partly about knowing how to do it as well. So I'm calling out to everybody listening, really. We'll stop for comments, I think. Does this ring a bell for you? Does this make sense? And does it remind you of occasions when you thought, that's a really good bit of work, I'd really like to present that, and you find that you can't get your abstract accepted, no matter what category you were trying to fit it into? But anyway, we're open for comments, people.
We might have stunned everyone with that, Andy.
It is my habit.
I mean, while people are thinking, talking about, I mean, it is interesting. It's quite, so the new IJOS, International Journal of Healthcare Simulation, they've made a real point that, they want to be curious about simulation and open it up, and they see simulation in all its capacity. And that's not to say that, I think we've come so far with simulation-based education, that's fabulous, but it does mean that we've created this frame around it where when you are publishing or applying to conferences, they're giving you a framework that all simulation has to fit into. And this is why this distinction is really important, so we can move it forward, because that's why the literature is confused, that's why people are confused in what they're doing, because they're having to abide by this, this kind of approach or way of doing it. And I've had it myself. I've been researching simulation for quite some time now. I've written loads of papers in it, and then I've had things come back that are saying, oh, this isn't proper simulation. And I'm like, well, who's decided what proper simulation is? Who said this is only what simulation can be? And why does it have to be limited? Why? Simulation isn't, the whole point of it is a safe environment to play. And play as children is where we learn the most. And it's also where we learn the most as adults, where we have the freedom to try things and do things differently. So why can't we use it in that capacity? I think this is how we have to start thinking. But this is why, in some ways, we want to kind of almost frame this, I guess, because then it will give people the opportunity, but we're keeping quite a wide framing. But it can take a life of its own, but it gives people the opportunity to think differently and give it a proper term that other people can relate to. So I think we've got some comments in the chat. Oh, that's great. People are really interested. Yeah. Well, this is it. Yeah, there's there's so many different perspectives on what sim is. Is that someone there with the hand up?
Hi, it's me. Hi. Hi, I might just introduce myself. I've been listening, fascinated. My name is Eileen, and I'm the Maternity and Neonatal Safety Improvement Lead for the Oxford Academic Health Science Network. And Rosie's on this team. And I'm here because Rosie helped me to be introduced to Andy. So it is really just me listening today, because I've not been part of your SIM network or anything like that. And just listening and watching what you've just presented, within maternity and neonatal services, we are reasonably familiar, not necessarily very good, but reasonably familiar with holding sort of co-creating listening events, and very much sort of what you've just presented resonated with me, and I love your slide with the sort of 7 different sort of pointers. But I'm here because we've got, as one of the biggest focuses of our work at the moment, working in maternity and neonatal safety, is optimization of the very preterm baby. Very complex and very difficult care pathway, and very different across the country. So we managed to get some funding across the southeast, which is where Rosie becomes a part of our working group. So we are very interested in understanding how we can use simulation. Initially, we started off thinking in a sort of a much smaller way, sort of in the model that you've just described, which is using it within training and education. But we sort of have a good relationship with a human factors member of the sort of Chartered Institute of Human Factors. So I was really keen to understand how could we bring together a large, diverse group of people from all sorts of walks of life who would be involved in the pre-hospital and hospital pathways, looking at the management of extreme preterm birth and how we get women in threatened preterm labour to the right place to optimise outcomes for their baby. Within the Thames Valley, the pathway is not so difficult because there's one tertiary centre. Across other parts of the country, there are very, very different and huge numbers of sort of pathways that have to be navigated. But we wanted to use human factors and a framework in that simulation or listening event, if you like, to sort of think differently, because these are really wicked problems. These are not easy to understand. So I just wanted to sort of talk about that a little bit, just to say why I'm here, and listening to the previous presentation using Avatar, I mean, phenomenal. So 100% I'm sure that we can do something amazing with the Southeast focus on preterm birth.
Sounds fabulous, yeah.
Thank you, Eileen. I think that's really well said, and I'm so pleased you managed to be here. And I think with Rosie, we've got wonderful opportunities across the region. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at somebody interested in maternity services, a pharmacist, a GP, a nurse professor, and there's some idiot ODP set at the top of the screen as well. There you go. So look at this for a multi-professional platform. We're about to hear from a surgeon who's been doing some really innovative work. I'm going to move us on in a moment, if that's okay, because we'll get to that next part of the timetable. But these are exciting days, and they're exciting days for this region. And I think, we've got some wonderful universities with great departments doing great work in health and care. We've got all this stuff going on, and we have a real chance to make an impact and make a difference. And Paul, I always enjoy your contributions, Paul. Yeah, the safe learning environment. We could go on and on about this, but I'm really excited about this work that Sharon's leading, because of the opportunity it gives us to gather this stuff in the right place for it to be. And that'll lead to an exponential change in the body of language of knowledge and what happens there.
It will almost give it its own platform, won't it? And like you say, highlight the good work that's being done, whereas I think it's not getting the recognition it deserves at the moment. Well,
I think that it's interesting that those people who do it and do it well get a spectacularly appreciative audience, if you like. And that just amplifies for me that this is something that we are not doing enough of. And I appreciate everybody's busy and we still have to deliver competence and capability and confidence and behavior. But what's the saying? If you keep on doing the same thing, you're going to get the same problem. And one of the issues with simulation is we value realism. And if the realism of the system is what makes it broken, then we're shooting ourselves in the foot by making a realistic system in which to try and learn. But there you go, a philosophical question. Okay, thank you all very much. I don't see any hands up at the moment. So I'm going to, with great delight, pass on to our next presenter, which is Professor Jagdanda, and I'll hand over to you, sir.
Hello, everyone. I'm calling in from from Malta at the moment, actually, in the middle of a Mediterranean storm. So it's my own fault for travelling away when it's pretty wet and rainy in the UK. I'm going to need to take hold of the screen. So I've got a little presentation about 10-15 minutes long. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very grateful for the invitation. Just to kind of highlight some of the work that I've been doing over the last year and a half using virtual reality and now mixed reality, augmented reality. And it's been a very short duration, but we've managed to achieve quite a lot. Thank you to the funding from Health Education England. I'm a chair of surgery at Brighton and a facial reconstructive microvascular surgeon based at East Grinstead and Brighton. So I'll see if I can get my screen up.
Yeah, we see your slide.
Brilliant. Okay, have you got that up?
Yeah, VRIMS.
Perfect. That's it, VRIM. So Virtual Reality Medicine and Surgery is a group that I set up, and I'm going to highlight the most recent endpoint as my first slide, because what you can see in front of you is the program for the course, the fourth VRIMS course that I delivered. It's a twice yearly course, which is a free for the end user, which means it's a free for trainee resource. And we were actually really delighted to have GASOC featured at the last course. So if you can imagine looking down the content, we were streaming cadaveric techniques to surgeons all around the world in the less privileged parts of the world, where actually we take surgical training for granted, I think, and we forget perhaps just how much of a privilege it is to have the resources that we have available to our trainees. But if you can imagine a kind of almost like a corkscrew being inserted into the umbilicus of a cadaver and then lifting up the anterior abdominal wall to perform gasless laparoscopy, and then having a live stream within virtual reality, all filmed in virtual reality, with surgeons who pioneered this technique in the actual virtual reality stream, talking about the nuances of the techniques. That's where we were with the last course. We did some C-sections, laparotomy, and some orthopedic long bone fracture management techniques, which we demonstrated as well. So I've been posting stuff online for quite some time. I'm a free flap surgeon. I rebuild a face, and I've got my own YouTube channel, and that's been quite successful over the last 3 or 4 years. So I'd film surgical techniques using virtual guided surgical techniques and then post those. And it was quite a job to be able to convince the trust of governance issues, IT issues. Of course, the General Medical Council gives us guidance on filming and posting content online. It has to have patient confidentiality at the forefront. But that was always quite easy to manage eventually once I got through the SOP. Because you're filming something on the end of a camera and then you're posting it after some post-production editing, so you can very much control who sees what, never any patient identifiable features within that. And that was quite a successful project for me. And then following on from that, I've been running these cadaveric training courses in facial reconstruction at Brighton for 3 years. And again, with some degree of success, quite kind of advanced surgical techniques with microvascular surgery, free flap reconstruction of perforators, and apology. So, of course, this happened to all of us. The pandemic certainly had resulted in me cancelling all my courses. So I needed to put my thinking hat on as to how I could deliver educational content, but be mindful of no proximity of trainees, because right at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know what impact that would have. So I put my thinking hat on and started to think about how I could deliver certainly Gaddavari content, but in the context of social distancing. And it was just pure fortune that Claire Smith, who's the Pro Vice Chancellor, and again, an acknowledgement to her, was already considering how to start to stream Gaddavari training content. She's on the HTA committees, and that was going to be quite a pioneering kind of approach, because historically, even just taking a camera into an anatomy suite was a big no-no, never mind filming this content and live streaming it. So we had this webinar overload, and medics became very, very quickly accustomed to using this as a training resource. But of course, we know that the interaction is very limited. At best, perhaps a Q&A at the end, or some in-presentation surveys. And I've been playing with VR for quite some time, both with the cameras and also with some of the gaming platforms as well. And came up with this idea of creating this group called Virtual Reality in Medicine and Surgery. But of course, virtual reality is nothing new. And in my mind, the reason why I don't think it's really taken off is because I think any early adopters will immediately think about the commercial value. My resources are funded by HEE. There is no commercial value. And I'm quite passionate about making this an end user free service. So for the 4 courses that we've now hosted, well over 1,000 delegates, they've never had to pay to see live streaming content. And the second reason is because the very early kind of consideration of more advanced techniques like haptics, which we're now starting to adopt with RIMS, and augmented reality were quite some way away. The approach was very much to learn to walk before we could run. Having said that, this is an exciting new project that HEE has just funded, a basic life support true VR app. So what I'm going to show you is 360 VR, and that is no more complicated than a camera with a lens at the front and behind. But actually, true VR is a little bit more sophisticated. In a true VR context, you're creating what's called 6 degrees of freedom, where you have a physical presence in this virtual world. So you can move around this virtual world. And what we did was that we hosted a 360 basic life support course for the Royal College of Surgeons, which was my pitch. And I'm going to see if I can switch from that video, which I've just switched on. Let's see if that works. Yeah, it's working. So here you'll see the actual 360 video. I'll put it to full screen. Can you still see that? Are you still able to see that? Good. Yeah. Okay. So here's the basic life support video. So let's go back a little bit and you'll actually see that. So what I'm going to show you is the in-camera streaming that we were doing to get that different perspective, and that's what. So that kind of demonstrates to you what we did with the video. Let me just get you back up. There we go. And I'm going to carry on with the presentation. So that was the pitch. So I'm doing something that nobody else is doing in VR. I'm actually in camera streaming multiple camera perspectives. And if you imagine you put your headset on, you can then simply choose these different perspectives by moving your head to the desired perspective you wanted. So we sent that out as a pitch, as a brief. We've got 3 companies now developing a true VR app in which we will have physiological sensors in the headset, where we're going to look at adaptation to training of the student. But I picked a very generic skill, basic life support, medical, non-medical. It's a generic skill that we'd want everybody to have. And these, but using haptics within hand controllers to assess competencies such as hand position, depth of compression, rate of compression, but also understand the science behind this technology, because it's a little bit short. It's not very forthcoming, the science behind the utility of VR as an educational resource. So we're going to compare these various groups, the standard of training, which is a physical presence demonstration and a physical dummy, versus a true VR dummy with haptics and hand gesture controls for competency to understand the science a little bit more. So these are some of the pitches that we've come back. We've got the first beta version ready of this app now to start the PhD project. So if you go onto the website, we have now banked all of that content and it's accessible and available. So what I didn't do at the very beginning was this kind of idea of really complex applications of VR, and kept it very simple, but understood very early on that it had applications in clinical techniques, for example, and they're scrubbing up for a hand fracture, having not done that for a while. Well, let's film a nurse setting up instruments for a hand fracture surgical procedure, and then have that available for them to watch before surgery. We know it's got value in medical surgical education. We also know it has value in patient applications in terms of management of pain. But instrument setup, surgical procedures, 360 simulation is probably where it has the biggest role, because in a surgical procedure, you don't really need to see the 360. Most of that redundant space I'm using in a more beneficial way. But actually in 360 simulation, in our first course, we had a patient's perspective of a road traffic accident in which you could physically feel like you were the patient who'd just been knocked over, and paramedics coming in and then going through that ATLS protocol. But the cadaveric stuff was where I started, and that was the unknown. So applications for patients, hadn't even really touched upon that, but that kind of stepwise approach, I think, allowed us to be quite successful. So I've got a couple of videos to show you. This is one of the first videos, and it just shows you that very early on, I didn't know what application it had, 360, and how much it could be tolerated. But even just using 360 videos on a desktop computer gives you a much better perspective. It certainly allows you to have an interaction. And so I was streaming from one end of the hospital to the other end of the hospital, just marking up a lower limb free flap for a trainee, and he was able to tap and scroll to whatever perspective he wanted. And so very early on, we set up this website, and that website was where we banked all the surgical content. We've moved on from this now to vrims.tv. And I think the essence of the project is there. It's a new way of training. It's free for trainees, for anyone and anywhere, and immersive. And that's just a screenshot of the video. As you scroll through, there were instructional videos of how to use your mobile phone as a VR headset. So again, not commercializing this. It's scalable. Very few people know that you can, well, I'd say at least 50% of my delegates in my courses knew that you could use your mobile phone as the VR headset, rather than spending hundreds of pounds on a more sophisticated headset with haptics. Actually, just using your mobile phone works as a headset. So we did some non-clinical stuff, no patient stuff early on, with demonstration of surgeon to surgeon, for example, hand examination, setting up a microscope, and that didn't require much in terms of an SOP, and patient contact was limited, and that got around the problem of confidentiality, because it's another level of complexity where everybody in that 360 environment has to consent for GDPR, but also then it's much more difficult to post-production edit these videos as well. So I've got another video, so there was a consent form on that as well. So in the very first course, we actually sent 100 of these headsets to plastics trainees, 100 to MaxFATS trainees, and 100 to ENT trainees. And this is the cost of a keyring to the sponsors. It was £10. But I knew this was going to be an uncomfortable headset, having already trialed it myself. And so recommended these headsets, which are £20. And again, we managed to get sponsors in the second and third course to send this out to the delegates. So I've got a little short instructional video of how you would set your mobile phone up in this headset and use it as a VR device. and I'll just give you a commentary over the top. So this is a £20 headset. You need to make sure you have downloaded the YouTube app on your mobile phone to be able to use this resource. You also need to probably register because some of the content is cadaveric and therefore 18 plus. So you click on the links. Essentially on the day when we run the course, we had QR codes and you just pointed your phone at your laptop, go to meeting, and it went into the live stream. So this is me setting up a microscope. When you put that into landscape view, you can then simply click on the VR icon on the bottom right. It makes it a binocular view. Place it in your headset. And what this headset allows you to do is to change the interpupillary distance and the focal depth, so you get a much clearer image. And that's your VR headset for the cost of a £20 headset. So just to recap, you simply clicked on the QR code or the links that we sent, and they're the links on the website. And you can tap and scroll for that 360 perspective if you want it, or you enlarge it to full screen landscape view. Click on your goggles icon at the bottom right, into binocular view, into the headset, put it on your head, and it's until you put it on your head, then the penny drops in the main, because then you feel like you're in that space. And the only final adjustment you need to make is that you need to make sure that the resolution is set to at least 1080, certainly for anatomical cadaveric content, because the default setting can be quite low at 480. So you just go to the settings, and I'll show you how to do that. Settings on the top right. Auto quality is a default setting for a lot of phones, and click it up to at least 1080 or 2160. So now what you've got is something that's very scalable. It's a new way of training, minimal costs, and all you need is a 4G network with this headset and your mobile phone. And you'll be surprised at how in the most deprived parts of the world where they struggle with the basics, they actually have a 4G signal and they have a mobile phone. So it's scalable, and we were streaming to the remote parts of the world, certainly in Africa and India at the last course. Now, the cadaveric content was quite interesting because, again, nobody had tried to demonstrate cadaveric videos, cadaveric dissection previously, and actually most modern cameras now are easily able to show you the detail. And actually these 360 cameras lend themselves really well to anatomical demonstrations, because we're a long way away from developing true VR apps that show this level of detail in anatomy. So the first course ran in 2020, and we started to it was very easy to convince surgeons to get on board this project. Actually, if you give surgeons a cadaver and you give them a gadget, they're all up for it. And we managed to get a lot of the surgical specialties in very quickly. And this is the content outline of the first 5-day course. But what I realized at that point was that rather than allowing this resource to be lost, I started to bank it and put it all together into an app. So this is the flat screen version of what you're seeing. You're seeing multiple camera perspectives, and this is zygomatic implants on models being inserted. And if you imagine you put it on your headset, you just move to the view that you want. We can put presentations in there. We can put international. We can put speakers in there, or having case conference reviews. So that is what you saw with the basic life support. This is a cadaveric, the HEMS helicopter team doing a chest clamshell thoracotomy, and you just moved your head to the perspective you wanted to demonstrate the technique. But what we're also able to do is put cameras into cavities, bullet cameras into difficult angles and difficult perspectives, or we can stream scopes and laparoscopy into these videos as well to demonstrate the techniques. So that was our setup at Brighton, and now we've got funding for a dedicated studio in Brighton. And That's Nick, who's my tech guy, and thanks to him and nice creation for their support with this. Some of the feedback was fantastic, and we'll publish this. The first few courses were aimed at more senior trainees, and they all found this experience of huge value. If you look at the ranges of techniques that we used it for demonstrating, actually has huge scope, and in that early series, only 61 thought they could use their mobile phone as a headset. But unanimously, its value in a post-COVID era of MedEd was evident. So yeah, this is quite interesting. In an 8-hour day, I can manage to maintain at least presence of 75%, 80% of the delegates throughout the day by interspersing 360 content with webinars and with clinical demonstrations. And that was just the first, we 580 views on the first day, 219 views, and we knew what kind of devices people were using to view this content as well. So second course, third course, content just carries on growing, really. I put all of this together into a kind of Netflix. It's like a Netflix or iPlayer app, where when we run successive courses, we restream previous content. We've got now more than 350 videos, including webinars, for example, demonstrations using VR of clinical techniques, cadaveric demonstration of surgical techniques, and the next step for us will be to demonstrate surgical procedures. So again, we've moved on from this. This is the Prezi app, but it's a nice little video just to demonstrate the concept. So in the first iteration, we just basically uploaded it onto Prezi, and you simply click the link, and then you had access to the entire library. And you could just tap through it and scroll through it. That was your debrief videos of how to use your mobile phone as a VR headset. So I'm an OMFS surgeon, double tap. I'm a head and neck surgeon, double tap. And I'm interested in perforator flaps. And I can just find the content I want. And so we can start with a lecture on principles of perforator dissection. And that takes you into the webinar. So now I've seen the 50-minute webinar. I want to see some clinical techniques. And I can just click the links that show me clinical techniques in VR. So here's a 360 VR markup of a perforator flap. And then you simply put it in your headset, and you're going to feel like you're there watching this. Back to the app, and now you want to watch some cadaveric demonstration of the techniques. And that takes you into the stream. And that's the camera in camera view. And cadaveric demonstration. So we moved on to that, to vrims.tv. I have to have the access control to some extent for two reasons. First of all, it's cadaveric, and I'm very mindful of the HTA regulations. It can't be a free-for-all, it has to be regulated. And we're very grateful for having that privilege to be able to demonstrate techniques on cadavers, but also that then lends itself to being able to fund this as a free-for-trainee or free-for-end user resource, because the sponsorship then is more convinced by a resource that's limited in a finite time. So I started with the Global Medicine Initiative and I finished with the Global Medicine Initiative. And the last thing to say is that we have another course. This was VRIMS 3, VRIMS 4, VRIMS 5 is in January. But what's going to be different about VRIMS 5 is that now I'm bringing in augmented reality techniques with mixed reality in a 3-day course, which will be day 1, endonasal ENT procedures, day 2, neurosurgery, and day 3, maxillofacial surgery, with both hands-on gadolinium techniques, restreaming previous VRIMS content, but also then having new VRIMS content added in that week's course as well. So I'm sorry I may have gone on a little bit. I'm happy to take some questions on that presentation from the group.
Well, thank you very much, Jag. At the moment, I'm breathless, to be honest. I suspect I'm not alone with that. I think you found a way to teach the world, and I'm having dabbled a little bit in 360 and VR. I'm incredibly impressed with what you've put together, and that you haven't in no way, not in the slightest degree, gone for the wow, it's a new bit of kit. This is sensible application of what the technology can provide for teaching. I'm stunned. I almost wish I was a MaxFax trainee. I don't know if there's any other comments. Any other comments anywhere?
Thanks, Andy.
So Robert Stewart asks, do you use real patients as part of your content?
Yeah, that's on the horizon. I think probably not from a surgical perspective immediately. The problem with that in our first course, I really didn't know how much of this could be tolerated. So my brief was quite strict. We had aesthetic surgery, for example, in the first course, and I said to my rhinoplasty surgeon, give me a 15-minute rhinoplasty clinical demonstration of not a patient, but just a member of staff. Then a 15 to 20-minute webinar, followed by a 15-minute demonstration of a gadolinium procedure, probably with some pre-dissection ready. And actually it was tolerated really well. And in the most recent course, we've had a 1-hour demonstration of technique. Now in surgery is never going to be 1 hour, and we have this one really inconvenient thing called blood to have to deal with. So I think when I go to the next step, it will be clinical demonstration of techniques with patients with good symptomology and signs, but also the 360 perspective and getting everybody in that space on board is really important. You know, when you put your headset on and you find a member of staff in the corner on their laptop doing their Tesco shopping, for example, that's going to be seen in that 360 video. So you have to have a full debrief of the entire environment. Getting around patients and their desire to want to consent when they're identifiable is going to be an issue as well, because they will be identifiable. Even though we're demonstrating their hands, when you put the headset on, you'll see their face because you see the entire 360. So I think it's going to be small little steps each time, understanding the science behind it, its utility, then moving on to something that logistically I think is a little bit more tricky to handle. But, you know, when you demonstrate its utility, I'm sure that will not be an insurmountable problem.
Fantastic. I'm going to stop you there, Jag. I think that we will look forward to hearing from you again when the next stage evolves. Thank you very much for taking the time. We had a previous presentation on human factors in eye surgery, which you would have enjoyed, from a Mediterranean villa. And now we have another. So we're becoming an international SimNet. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Thank you very much. We're going to just move on to just in the closing minutes ask people for a round robin of their news. But that is genuinely very impressive. And to echo what Dawn said, very impressed with the altruism with which you've done all this work. Thank you. Yeah, so there's some great comments coming up in the chat, and if you'd like to stop sharing your screen for us, Jag, I'll ask now, raise your hand, please, if you have something that you'd like to share with the group. Latest bit of news, a problem you have, a comment on anything, an offer for the next meeting, this is your chance to let us know what's going on. Amelia, please.
Hi everyone. Sorry for muscling in, but I've seen Ian O'Neill in the audience. Ian, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, hi. And I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to show you a little bit about our blended learning program and the poster that we produced. Ian left the trust and you haven't even seen the poster. So I'm gonna hijack the meeting now to show you a little bit, if I can show the screen.
I'll have to make you a presenter for that, I think.
Well, it's well worth seeing. So we have, we're using the IRIS platform, and due to COVID, we had to find a new approach to practical procedure learning. And the project team sat down together how we could do that, and Ian came up with a really fabulous method. That is embarrassing. I can't actually find it, even though I've opened it. Yay!
Yay!
And a big butt appears in your screen. So we have a blended learning program, and this is the first one of its kind, lumbar puncture, that consists of an e-learning module, which is really fabulous. People have to complete that before they can book onto a session. And we have done this, or we're in the process of doing this for a series of procedures. And we're really proud of that project. And whilst Ian is here, I'll very quickly show you the poster as well, if I can find it. Yeah. Which we will present at the DMEC. And that showcases the 4 procedures that we have so far, but there are still
brilliant
some in the making. Thank you.
Brilliant. Please bring that to the conference in May next year, please.
Will do. Thanks.
And great stuff. Yeah. And moving rapidly on, my foot's right on the accelerator now. So yes, Ian, Amelia, thank you. Jane, you have a hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Well, firstly, actually, it was just thank you, because actually it's been fantastic. Actually, it's been amazing to hear what's going on. But quickly, what it was that obviously, as I said before, I am a GP. There's obviously we've got a little pocket of primary care simulation work going on in West Kent, and I've got this new role which is developing primary care simulation out across Kent, Surrey and Sussex. So it was coming back to Andy's ask and offer, actually. So my ask is, there's so much enthusiasm. Primary care staff are really keen to use simulation. I've done some in situ stuff, and I've also had some fantastic support from the team at Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells. So Debbie, I can see you're there, so thank you, and to all of your team. In fact, actually, I advertised a course that we're running at Tunbridge Wells around emergencies on Wednesday morning. Within 2 hours, all 20 places had gone, and I've got a waiting list with kind of steadily running. So as I say, there's lots of enthusiasm, and my ask actually is, what I'm wanting to do, obviously, to bring it out across Kent, Surrey and Sussex, I need to sort of engage with other sim suites. So my ask is, are there people out there that would be willing? I've got the scenarios, we've got everything, timetable, we know how to kind of run it, but I would really love to bring it out to other centres so that I can actually get sort of primary care, and this is more than GPs, this is sort of multi-professional. So if there's anyone out there that would like to, I'll put my email in the chat on the fingers crossed chance that, or if I come knocking on your door, I'd be very keen to see if that's a possibility, please. So I don't know what my offer could be, but I'm very happy to kind of help with whatever offer goes alongside it. At the moment, it may just be that you're engaging with primary care, and actually it's been so positive in West Kent that there's so much that's kind of come out of it as sort of secondary gains.
Yeah, Jane, we will also add your request to the next round robin email that goes out. Happy to let you piggyback on that with that. I think you're offering an exciting collaboration actually, and sim centres are very busy, but I'm sure there's capacity here and there, and it's just a matter of alignment really. And I can't speak for my wonderful university, and Kate Brown, who's the faculty director, has had to leave now for another meeting, but we will look to see what we can do in our part of the world. And don't worry, I'll think of an offer for you. There's some sort of simulation thing that you will be able to contribute to, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay, looking around the room, yeah, I completely agree. Debbie says good to work. Yeah, there's some good comments coming in. Right, Paul, you've appeared. Paul and Robert have appeared. Is that because you switched your camera on because you thought you were leaving the meeting, or did you want to say something?
I'm happy to speak if you want me to.
Yeah, go on, Paul.
I've, believe it or not, I've actually been attending this entire session while supporting simulation in our sim suite at the same time, which is anyway. Yeah, the only things I was going to say is this morning we did our first on the Frimley Park Hospital site human factors simulation in ED, which involved a debrief by 2 airline pilots who, as part of it's called the Wing Factors project, and we obviously pay for a set number of hours for them to come in. And they do human factors debriefing, which went exceptionally well. And I would advise anyone who's not involved with that project, you might want to have a look at it, because although obviously it costs, because the airline pilots are doing some amazingly good work at giving non-clinical human factors feedback to the clinical scenarios that are being run. And I know my partner hospital, Wexham Park Hospital, has been using human factors simulation with the Wing Factors team for quite a while now. Obviously, difficult conversation simulator we've talked about already. So, we get to use it for the first time next week, where we get to set up. And we're looking forward to hopefully rolling that out to other staff groups. And the only other thing I was going to say was talking about 360 videos earlier. We've just started putting on a whole load of facilitator and candidate resources on our online learning portal for both facilitators, like our e-learning on human factors and how to run simulation sessions and how to deal with problems. But also we've got a load of resources for candidates, like I've done a 360 tour of our sim suite. So rather than have to give them a physical tour that takes 15 minutes, they can just look at the 15-minute online 360 tour, and then we can do a tour really quickly. And that's enough from me, I think.
360 is great for tours and that sort of intro stuff. Yeah. Robert.
So I was just going to say one thing. I was just building on what Jane said, is that I'm also from our Digital Innovation Centre, which obviously we hosted the SimNet meeting before. Our whole business model is around collaboration, whether that's around faculty, facilities, funding or research. And so I really think this is a really good environment to be able to do that. And I was going to boast that we've got 8 Oculus headsets and 4 Frailty headsets, but having listened to the last one, I reckon perhaps we've actually invested in the wrong thing. Perhaps we should have been investing in the very cheap mobile phone headsets rather than those. But anyway, it's been a great meeting. Thanks very much, Andy. And I just want to collaborate with as many people as we can, and whether we can share our facilities or come and use our team in other people's facilities. And we're really looking forward to hosting Jane coming to see us in the very near future. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Very well said. And there's always a place for the high-end kit. I think it very much is about what your learning process is. And when people are with you in the classroom and you have a VR element, and it can be quite different to sharing your max fax surgery with another continent or whatever, or people at home. So there's coming online fairly soon, everybody, will be the HEE STG offer, which includes VR. It's not Oculus. I think it's an HTC headset. There's HoloLens headsets. There's the River VR classroom in a box. Various bits of kit that will be available on loan from HEE. So this is an exploding area of work, but I would recommend to everybody that you take a careful look at what JAG was doing, because it is so much not about the kit but what you do with it. And again, with Amelia and Ian's work, it's finding that application and getting the detail of how you do it right. Okay. Right, I'm looking around a still fairly crowded room. I don't see any hands up, and it is 4:30. So thank you all for your attendance. I'm sorry we maybe didn't have as much time to get round everybody as I imagined at the start of the day, but I think if you made it through to the end, you can appreciate why. We've had some really good content delivered today, and I'm very impressed with you all. I'm looking for the hosts, don't forget, for February, for the next meeting, and don't forget that first conference in May. And thank you all very much, and goodbye.